Deep within the remote forests of the Karelian wilderness, a silent peak guards a terrifying secret. This is Mount Volada, a place where the wind carries echoes of a battle no one survived. Roughly translated as the Mountain of Victory, its name hides a history of blood and ancient shadows. Located on the eastern side of the Finnish-Soviet border, it remains one of Europe's most isolated reaches. On this peak, 100 men vanished into a night of screams and frantic, desperate gunfire. When the smoke finally cleared, their enemy was nowhere to be found among the frozen carnage. A company of heavily armed Russian soldiers was reportedly slaughtered here, leaving only questions and corpses. How does an entire company of trained soldiers simply cease to exist in a single winter night? The silence following the massacre was absolute, broken only by the whistling of the bitter Arctic wind. The mountain was like a fortress that did not need walls to keep the curious at bay. For generations, the local Sami people have refused to step foot on this highest, cursed peak. Why did they avoid the heights of Vottovaara even when the valley below offered no protection? Ancient legends warn that some places on this earth were never meant for the living to walk. During the brutal Winter War, the landscape became a frozen graveyard for those who dared to enter. Tactical experts and SAS formations have long studied how such a force could be so completely erased. Shadowy tales of the Stalo suggest that the mountain itself might have been the true attacker. Others whisper of a skinwalker, a shape-shifting horror stalking the soldiers through the deep, black snow. No footprints led away from the site, suggesting the killers were either ghosts or something far worse. Mount Volada stands today as a grim monument to the unexplained violence of that dark, forgotten night. To understand how a company was erased, we must look at the shadow looming over Europe in 1939. We often imagine the Soviets and Nazis as mortal enemies, yet in 1939, they were secret partners. Before the massacre on Vottovaara, a sinister pact was signed in the deep shadows of Moscow. This was the Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact, an agreement that aligned the Soviet Union with Nazi Germany. What happens when history's greatest villains decide to share a continent like a predator's prize? On September 1, 1939, Nazi Germany unleashed its full military might and invaded Poland. Following this invasion, Britain and France declared war on Germany, igniting a global firestorm. But the world didn't know the Soviet Union would soon strike from the eastern border. Under their secret agreement with Germany, Soviet forces launched a sudden attack on Poland's eastern front. Together, these two powers began to tear the nation apart, redrawing the map of Europe. Amidst the chaos, Joseph Stalin looked toward the Leningrad area to reinforce his strategic defenses. He sought to secure the region against a potential German push, despite their temporary alliance. These geopolitical moves set the stage for the terrors waiting in the snowy Karelian wilderness. The indigenous Sami people would soon witness a conflict far more brutal than any typical war. Legends of the Stalo and skinwalkers began to whisper through the ranks of marching soldiers. The Winter War was coming, and Vottovaara was preparing to claim its first victims. The icy air of the north held a tension that felt almost supernatural to the arriving troops. Somewhere in the frozen depths of the Karelian wilderness, an ancient presence began to stir. Elite SAS formations would eventually find themselves caught between human enemies and something far darker. As the borders shifted, the path led straight to the summit of the terrifying Death Mountain. With Poland falling, Stalin turned his sights toward the north, where the mountain's shadow waited. But Stalin's push for Leningrad hit a wall, the rugged and unyielding Finnish border. In 1939, Finland stood as a small nation of just 4 million defiant souls. This tiny population was roughly half the size of the Red Army's total reserves alone. It was a classic David versus Goliath, set against a frozen and trackless northern wilderness. The Karelian Isthmus remained a vital part of Finland as tensions reached a breaking point. Within this region lay the Karelian wilderness, a place where nature itself felt heavy and ancient. The Finnish landscape was defined by dense, dark woodlands stretching endlessly toward the horizon. Only a few winding roads cut through the thick timber, creating a natural fortress of wood. On November 1, 1939, the silence shattered as the Winter War officially commenced. Soviet bombers appeared over Helsinki, raining fire down upon the historic Finnish capital city. As Helsinki burned, the Finnish people realized their long-feared nightmare had finally become a reality. To face the Soviet steamroller, Finland called upon its vast citizen army of dedicated reservists. These men were farmers and woodsmen, but they knew every shadow within the Karelian wilderness. They stood ready to defend their homes against the encroaching shadow of Soviet expansion. How do you defend a border when you are outnumbered at every single turn? Whispers of the Sami people spoke of ancient spirits lurking within the deepest forest groves. Legends of the Stalo and the dreaded Skinwalker haunted the dreams of soldiers on both sides. These myths felt all too real in the cold, misty heights of Mount Vottovaara. The Finnish troops moved like ghosts, mimicking the legendary SAS formations in their stealthy tactics. To the invaders, the woods seemed to come alive with a primal, supernatural hunger. The trackless terrain turned the Red Army's massive mechanized advantage into a crushing liability. Tanks struggled on narrow paths while Finnish snipers vanished into the dense, snowy woodlands. Every tree seemed to watch, and every mountain peak held a silent, watchful presence. The Finns knew this land, and they understood its many hidden, deadly secrets. They knew the woods, but they also knew the mountains were not to be trifled with. As the frost deepened, the true horror of the Winter War began to unfold. In the wilderness, threats are physical, but in our modern world, the most dangerous predators are digital. Just like the soldiers on Mount Vottovaara, we rarely see the threats gathering until it is too late. While ancient spirits haunt the Karelian wilderness, modern data brokers are hunting your personal information right now. These brokers act like SAS formations, invisible scouts for a digital army you didn't know was attacking. Think about it. Who is selling your private story on the dark web at this very moment? This is where our sponsor, Aura, steps in to shield your digital life from these hidden threats. Aura intelligently identifies which specific data brokers are profiting by selling your sensitive personal information to others. The risks are more real than ever, especially following the massive and recent AT&T data breach. This staggering breach exposed the personal records of over 73 million unsuspecting customers to the open web. It didn't just affect current users. Records of former customers were also caught in this digital dragnet. These millions of sensitive records were eventually leaked and released onto the dangerous corners of the dark web. Much like the legends of the Sami people, modern threats often hide in plain sight before striking. Without protection, your identity is left vulnerable, much like a lone soldier lost in the freezing woods. Or it provides a powerful defense by automatically submitting opt-out requests to these intrusive data broker sites. They take the fight to the brokers, ensuring your private data remains your own and out of reach. Beyond just cleaning up your data, or it provides essential services like credit locks to secure your finances. Their prevention tools act as a frozen shield against the modern world's digital invaders and Stalo. Stop these digital skinwalkers from mimicking your identity and selling your life to the highest bidder. Take back control of your information before the digital predators find a way to exploit your story. Protect your digital footprint today so you can focus on the mysteries of the physical world instead. We must stay guarded as we leave the digital shadows and return to the deep Karelian wilderness. Now, let us venture back into the frozen hell of the Winter War and its lingering mysteries. November 1939 began with a rain of fire as Soviet bombs fell upon the city of Helsinki. This massive invasion across the border signaled the start of what history calls the Winter War. Stalin unleashed a staggering force of 450,000 men against the small Finnish nation. 14 divisions poured across the Karelian Isthmus, a landscape soon to be soaked in blood and ice. Thousands of tanks and artillery pieces rumbled forward, supported by a swarm of deadly aircraft overhead. But the Red Army was marching into a trap set by the very earth itself. As the sun vanished, the temperature plummeted to a bone-chilling negative 45 degrees Fahrenheit. Can you imagine fighting for your life when the very air you breathe tries to kill you? Despite the brutal conditions, many Soviet soldiers lacked even basic winter coats for protection. The Finnish winter became a weapon more effective than any artillery battery in their arsenal. In the shadow of Mount Vottovaara, the wilderness prepared to devour the invading masses. The frozen forests of the Karelian wilderness transformed into a silent, white graveyard for the unprepared. Finland's small population faced a giant, yet they possessed a shield the Soviets could not pierce. Fingers froze to rifles and blood turned to ice before it could even hit the ground. Whispers of the Sami people and ancient spirits like the Stalo haunted the shivering Russian ranks. Every step through the deep snow felt like a march toward an inevitable, frozen end. Metal tanks became icy tombs as the extreme cold rendered machines and men equally useless. Darkness settled over the front lines, hiding the movements of a ghostly and invisible enemy. Those 14 divisions were slowly swallowed by a landscape that refused to be conquered by force. At 45 below, skin would blacken and die within minutes of exposure to the wind. Thin summer uniforms offered no defense against the hungry teeth of the Arctic frost. The trees groaned under the weight of the ice, sounding like the screams of dying men. But the cold was not the only thing the Soviets had to fear in those woods. Deep within the Karelian wilderness, something far more sinister than the weather was watching them. The stage was set for a massacre that would defy explanation for decades to come. The massive Soviet force of 450,000 men marched blindly into the frozen Finnish woods. These soldiers were ill-prepared for the brutal reality of the winter war that lay ahead of them. Despite the lethal conditions, many Red Army soldiers were never issued proper winter coats for the journey. Without adequate protection, the men were left defenseless against the biting winds of the Karelian wilderness. As they moved deeper into the forest, the mercury plummeted toward a bone-chilling 45 degrees below zero. At minus 45 degrees, the very air they breathed became a razor-sharp blade inside their lungs. Exposed skin froze in seconds, turning the simple act of survival into an agonizing, daily struggle. The darkness of the Finnish winter swallowed the massive army, hiding the true terrors of the night. In this frozen hell, the line between reality and nightmare began to blur for the shivering troops. Hunger and hypothermia soon gave way to a primal sense of desperation that gripped every frozen heart. Within the shadows of the Vottovaara region, the extreme cold began to play tricks on their minds. Soldiers reported seeing strange shapes moving among the trees, twisting into figures from ancient Sami people legends. These hallucinations were the first signs that the mind was breaking under the weight of the frost. Some whispered of the Stalo, the terrifying giants that haunt the folklore of the indigenous northern tribes. Others feared a skinwalker was stalking their ranks, waiting for the weakest men to finally collapse. The biting cold stripped away their humanity, leaving only a hollow shell of fear and mounting paranoia. Every snapping twig sounded like an enemy scout or a predatory spirit emerging from the deep gloom. Madness spread through the divisions like a plague, fueled by the lack of sleep and endless shivering. They were no longer an organized army, but a desperate mass of men lost in a frozen void. As the temperature remained locked at 45 below, the soldiers' grip on the physical world slipped away. These hallucinations prepared the ground for the strange events soon to unfold on the slopes of Vottovaara. The stage was set for a descent into a darkness that no military training could ever endure. As the Soviets marched into the Karelian wilderness, they were entering a land with its own ancient rules. The Sami have walked this land for 8,000 years, and they believe every rock and tree has a soul. In this frozen realm, some of those spirits are hungry, watching the invaders from the deep shadows. These indigenous people, the Sami, are the true masters of the region surrounding the mysterious Mount Volada. Their nomadic populations are spread far across the frozen reaches of Denmark, Norway, Sweden, and modern Finland. Archaeological evidence proves their ancient presence in Karelia stretches back a staggering 8,000 years into the past. What if the nature you are invading is actually watching you back with ancient, silent eyes? The foundation of their world is a spiritual faith known as animism, a powerful form of shamanism. To the Sami, the forest isn't just a place. It is a living, breathing community of spirits. Their faith holds that physical elements like animals, rocks, and plants all possess a unique life force. Every jagged stone and ancient pine tree carries a soul that demands respect from those who pass. As the Winter War loomed, the Red Army saw only wood, but the Sami saw a living consciousness. A clash was brewing between modern steel and an ancient world where nature itself holds the power. Cold winds whispered through the Karelian wilderness, carrying the warnings of a culture that time forgot. For the uninvited soldier, every rustle in the undergrowth felt like a predator from an older era. Those ancient pine trees stood like silent sentinels, guarding secrets that the Soviet maps could never chart. This was the heart of the Karelian wilderness, a place where the line between myth and reality blurs. Through shamanism, the Sami communicated with the hidden energies vibrating within the very earth beneath their feet. Every element of the natural world was part of a complex tapestry of living, breathing spiritual entities. And at the center of this haunting, spiritual landscape stood the dark and foreboding Mount Vottovaara. To the Soviets, it was just high ground, but to the world, it was a terrifying anomaly. Rising above the Karelian wilderness, Mount Volada stands as the highest peak in this entire desolate region, reaching an elevation of 1,369 feet. It commands a view of everything below. It is a place where gravity seems optional and life itself feels strangely and deeply unwelcome. Upon the slopes, massive boulders rest precariously atop much smaller stones in an impossible, haunting balance. These bizarre SAS formations look like a house of cards built by ancient and forgotten giants. While they look like natural accidents, these boulders were actually shaped by human hands thousands of years ago. The Sami people left these sites behind, marking the mountain as a site of profound spiritual power. But the geography grows even stranger when you look closer at the ancient pine trees nearby. Why would pine trees over a century-old stubbornly refuse to grow any taller than a man? These trees have survived for approximately 122 years in this harsh and unforgiving environment. Despite their great age, they reach a height of only 2 meters, twisted by some unseen force. Their gnarled branches seem to crawl across the ground rather than reaching toward the cold Arctic sun. Below these strange groves lie bodies of water that the local residents call the Dead Lakes. These pools are eerily still, reflecting the gray sky with a clarity that feels completely unnatural. Within these dead lakes, you will find no living fish or other organisms of any kind surviving. Even the smallest aquatic plants seem unable to take root in these silent and obsidian-colored depths. The silence of the mountain is absolute, as even common insects reportedly avoid the entire ecosystem. Without the buzz of flies or the chirp of birds, the mountain feels like a massive tomb. This physical wrongness creates a lingering dread that follows every step into the dark Vottovaara landscape. Legends speak of the Stalo and other shadows that haunt the peaks where nature has failed. No insects, no fish, and no life remain. There is only the heavy, silent weight of the mountain. Beyond the frozen ridge of Vottovaara, a haunting stillness defies every known law of the natural world. The Karelian wilderness is typically teeming with life, yet this mountain remains an island of absolute silence. Even during the heat of the Winter War, soldiers noticed a chilling absence of the usual forest sounds. In any other forest, the hum of insects provides a constant backdrop to the struggle for survival. But here on Vottovaara, the air is unnervingly empty, devoid of even the smallest crawling or flying creatures. Scientific records suggest that insects instinctively avoid this entire ecosystem as if sensing a hidden, ancient danger. Not a single mosquito buzzes in the thick air, leaving a void that feels heavy and entirely unnatural. This sterility extends far beyond the rocky slopes and deep into the dark waters surrounding the peak. Local residents whisper of the many bodies of water that sit motionless at the mountain's jagged base. These stagnant pools have earned a terrifying name from those who dare to live near the Karelian wilderness. They call them the Dead Lakes, a grim title that reflects the complete lack of life within them. Peer into the crystal-clear depths of these dead lakes and you will find a haunting, watery desert. There are no schools of fish darting through the reeds, nor any microscopic organisms thriving in the silt. Biologists find this total absence of aquatic life to be a scientific impossibility in such a lush region. Even the hardiest organisms, which survive in the harshest climates on Earth, cannot be found in these waters. The Sami people have long known that Vottovaara is a place where the rules of nature simply vanish. They speak of the Stalo, ancient giants that might explain why the mountain remains so eerily empty. To a retreating soldier in the Winter War, this lack of life felt like a bad omen approaching. The silence of the insects and the stillness of the lakes create an atmosphere of suffocating, predatory dread. Every scientific inquiry into the mountain's sterility only deepens the mystery of why life chooses to stay away. It is as if the very soil and water of Vottovaara are cursed by a history we cannot understand. Whether haunted by a skinwalker or shaped by strange SAS formations, the mountain's void remains a chilling reality. As we look closer, the biological impossibility of this silence suggests the mountain itself is a living warning. In the heart of the Karelian wilderness, the dead lakes stand as silent witnesses to an unexplained power. This unnatural peace is merely the prelude to the terrifying events that would soon unfold on these slopes. But warnings from locals are rarely heeded by empires marching blindly into the unknown. The Sami warned them, the sites are not just stones, they are ancient doors. Stepping onto Mount Volada was like walking into a sacred cathedral with mud-caked boots on. For generations, the Sami people have revered this peak as the spiritual heart of the Karelian wilderness. They speak of the mountain as a thin place, a literal gateway into other terrifying realms. Scattered across the slopes are the SAS formations, strange balanced rocks known as sites. To the uninitiated, they look like geological oddities, but to the locals, they are far more. The Sami believe these towering sites serve as physical dwellings for ancient and powerful entities. These beings guard the high places, demanding respect from all who dare to tread here. Long ago, the mountain served as a vital intersection for migrating reindeer and schools of fish. This natural abundance made it a place of gathering, but also a place of deep spiritual caution. Even today, those who follow the old ways still observe sacred rites upon these windswept slopes. They leave offerings and speak in whispers, fearing they might wake what sleeps beneath the stone. When the Soviet soldiers arrived, the local elders pleaded with them to turn back immediately. They spoke of the Stalo and other shadows that do not take kindly to invaders. What happens when you occupy a gateway that your ideology tells you cannot possibly exist? To the hardened commanders of the Red Army, these were merely the superstitions of peasants. They saw only tactical high ground, ignoring the spiritual weight pressing down upon the ridge. The warnings were dismissed as campfire stories meant to frighten young men in the cold. But the air around the sites grew heavy, as if the mountain itself was drawing breath. Every balanced rock seemed to watch the marching columns with a cold, silent intensity. Tales of the skinwalker and other shapeshifters echoed through the dark woods during those nights. The soldiers felt a growing dread, a sense that they were being hunted by unseen eyes. Ignoring the sacred, the Soviet 8th Army gave the final, fateful order to begin their ascent. They were no longer just fighting the Finns, they were trespassing in a realm of giants. As they climbed, the silence of Vottovaara became a physical weight against their shivering chests. Little did they know, they were marching straight into the jaws of an ancient nightmare. The Soviets saw only tactical heights, but the Sami people knew Vottovaara as something far more vital. This peak stands as a silent sentinel within the vast, untamed reaches of the Karelian wilderness. Long before the Winter War, this land hummed with the natural rhythms of life and survival. To understand the mountain's power, one must look at the paths carved by the earth itself. Mount Volada served as a crucial intersection where the ancient migrations of the north converged. Massive herds of reindeer once flooded these slopes, following instincts older than any human empire. Below the ridges, the crystalline waters became a seasonal highway for vast migrations of silver-scaled fish. This unique meeting point transformed the mountain into a literal larder for the local indigenous tribes. Such abundance required protection, not from men, but from the spirits that governed the wild. To guard these vital resources, the Sami placed sacred stone markers known as the situs. Strange SAS formations and boulders were positioned with intent, overseeing the paths of every creature that passed. The situs weren't just stones, they were the physical anchors for the mountain's ancient, watchful spirits. While the Soviets ignored these silent sentinels, the local people treated them with profound, fearful respect. Even today, the modern world has not fully erased the old ways from this haunted peak. Deep in the shadows, sacred rites are still observed by those who follow the old traditions. These practitioners understand that the mountain demands a heavy price for those who do not belong. They whisper warnings of the Stalo and the Skinwalker, entities that prowl the edges of reality. By honoring the stones, they hope to appease the forces that the Winter War so violently disturbed. The intersection of life and myth makes Vottovaara a place where the physical and spiritual worlds collide. As the Red Army ascended, they were trampling upon ground that had been consecrated for millennia. 100 heavily armed men marched toward a single objective that would soon become their death sentence. The order from Soviet command was simple: take the heights of Vottovaara and watch the valley below. As part of the Soviet 8th Army, this company believed they were merely securing a tactical advantage. They moved with the confidence of an empire, ignoring the ancient shadows stretching across the Karelian wilderness. But the mountain they called Volada was not just high ground, it was a place of old power. Local legends whispered of things that did not belong to the world of men or modern warfare. While the Soviets climbed, the Sami people watched from the tree line with the knowledge born of millennia. Many Sami men had already left their reindeer herds to join the fight against the invading force. Whether through conscription or a fierce desire to protect their sacred lands, they joined the Finnish army. These indigenous scouts knew every hidden path and every treacherous rock face on the slopes of Vottovaara. They were the invisible eyes of the Finnish defense, blending perfectly into the frozen, white landscape. Did the Soviet soldiers feel those hidden eyes on them as they began setting up their camp? Like 100 mice building a nest in a lion's den, they unknowingly invited their own destruction. The biting cold of the Winter War began to seep into their heavy wool coats and boots. Their mission was to establish a permanent observation post to direct the massive Soviet artillery fire. Hammering pitons and setting up communications wire, they worked with the efficiency of a well-oiled machine. Yet, the silence of the mountain was heavy, unnatural, and far more oppressive than the winter wind. Every crack of a branch sounded like a gunshot in the thin, freezing air of the heights. They were deep within the Karelian wilderness now, far from the safety of their main supply lines. The 8th Army Company reached the summit, unaware that they had crossed an invisible, sacred threshold. Below them, the vast forests of Finland looked like a sea of white daggers pointing at the sky. Even as they fortified their position, the sense of being hunted began to gnaw at their nerves. The Sami scouts moved like ghosts, reporting every Soviet movement to the Finnish commanders in the valley. A clash of cultures and survival was unfolding on this peak, fueled by the desperation of war. As the sun set on that first night, the mountain fell into a terrifying, absolute silence. The 100 men huddling for warmth had no idea that the screaming was about to begin. Below, in the valley, Finnish scouts could only listen to the sound of an army fighting an invisible war. They did not see the enemy, but only heard the terror echoing through the dark Karelian wilderness. High atop the summit of Vottovaara, the silence of the Winter War was suddenly shattered by frantic gunfire. Muzzle flashes flickered against the heavy clouds, illuminating the jagged peaks like a series of rhythmic lightning strikes. The Finnish soldiers exchanged confused glances as they realized they were not the targets of this violent assault. Who were the Soviets shooting at if no Finnish units had even begun their ascent of the mountain. It was like listening to a massive ship go down in a storm from the safety of the shore. Screams of pure agony drifted down the slopes, carried by the biting winds of the frozen Finnish winter. Explosions rocked the foundations of the peak. Yet no return fire was ever heard from a human opponent. The Soviet company seemed to be locked in a desperate struggle against a phantom hiding within the stones. Throughout that first night, the sounds of panicked shouting and rapid-fire rifles never truly ceased for a moment. When the sun finally rose, a heavy, unnatural fog settled over the ridges, hiding the carnage from view. The Finnish scouts waited for a counterattack that never came, their breath hitching in the frigid morning air. As darkness returned for the second night, the chaos on the mountain began with even greater, more frantic intensity. For 2 consecutive nights, the top of Mount Volada transformed into a chaotic theater of unseen and inexplicable death. Stories of the Stalo and other ancient spirits whispered through the minds of those listening in the valley. Perhaps the Soviet troops had encountered a skinwalker, or something even more ancient and hungry within the woods. The sheer volume of fire suggested organized SAS formations, yet the mountain remained a solitary, isolated fortress. Every soldier in the valley felt the weight of the Sami people's warnings about this sacred, cursed ground. Was this the work of nature itself, or did the mountain possess a mind of its own? The Finnish commanders held their positions, unwilling to lead their men into the mouth of such madness. They watched the summit through binoculars, seeing only the distant, hellish glow of fires burning in the snow. The screams became less human as the hours passed, twisting into sounds that defied any logical military explanation. No SOS signals were sent, and no orders were relayed to the men waiting helplessly in the shadows. For 2 nights, the mountain roared with the sounds of a massacre that left the Finns cold with dread. On the 3rd morning, the gunfire finally faded, leaving nothing but the hollow whistling of the northern wind. A terrifying stillness proclaimed the heights of Vottovaara, signaling that the invisible war had finally come to an end. As the morning mist lifted, a Finnish scouting party finally ascended the silent, blood-soaked slopes of Vottovaara. What they found at the summit was not a battlefield, but a frozen graveyard of absolute horror. 100 Soviet soldiers lay scattered across the peak, their bodies twisted in final, desperate poses. The massacre was complete, leaving an entire company of the Red Army silent in the Karelian wilderness. Yet, as the scouts searched the area, a chilling realization began to settle over the snowy ground. Despite the overwhelming carnage before them, not a single Finnish casualty could be found anywhere. The scouts stood untouched, looking down at a defeated enemy that they had never actually engaged. It was a tactical impossibility, a slaughterhouse where the supposed victors hadn't even fired a shot. As they moved closer to inspect the remains, the nature of the injuries became terrifyingly clear. These men had not been killed by bullets or the standard steel of a Finnish blade. The majority of the dead Soviets bore deep, ragged wounds that defied any conventional military explanation. Jagged tears in heavy winter coats revealed injuries consistent with the work of massive predator claws. Flesh had been ripped away by powerful fangs, leaving marks that no human weapon could ever replicate. The sheer brutality suggested an animalistic hunger, yet no known beast in the wilderness was this efficient. Each body told a story of a struggle against something far more primal than a human soldier. But among the torn remains, an even more disturbing pattern began to emerge from the snow. Scattered throughout the camp were soldiers who appeared to have taken their own lives in terror. Evidence suggested that several Soviet troops had turned their own firearms against themselves at the end. It seemed they chose the cold finality of their own bullets over whatever was hunting them. Why would a soldier choose his own bullet over the unseen predator in the dark? The Sami people had long warned of the ancient, hungry spirits guarding the peaks of Vottovaara. Locals whispered of the legendary Stalo, or a skinwalker descending upon the doomed Soviet company. The scene was a chaotic puzzle of human remains where none of the broken pieces fit. This massacre on the mountain remains one of the most chilling enigmas of the Winter War. In the Karelian wilderness, the heights of Vottovaara had claimed their prize with terrifying precision. The Soviets had been torn apart sometimes by the mountain, and sometimes by their very own hands. The Soviets eventually renamed this place Death Mountain, but they never admitted what truly killed their men. Was it nature's fury, or something the history books simply cannot explain to this very day? Searching for a natural explanation is like trying to put a small bandage on a horrific decapitation. Skeptics often point to the Eurasian wolves that prowl through the dense and dark Karelian wilderness. These predators are known to hunt in organized packs consisting of up to 24 lethal members. Can a single pack of 24 wolves really take down 100 heavily armed Soviet soldiers? Even the most efficient predators usually avoid the thunder of gunfire and the sharp smell of gunpowder. Then there are the brown bears, which are common across the vast lands of Eurasia and North America. A startled bear, a terrifying force, but one animal cannot account for an entire company's demise. Bears and wolves were common, but these natural beasts do not drive grown men to commit suicide. Despite the lingering questions, the political tides of the Winter War soon forced a bitter conclusion. In March 1940, Finland finally yielded to Soviet demands and surrendered part of the Karelian region. The silent slopes of Vottovaara passed into Russian hands, carrying their dark secrets into a new era. But the peace was a fragile mask, destined to be shattered by the shifting alliances of world powers. June 1941 brought Operation Barbarossa, the massive German invasion that changed the course of history. Seizing the moment, Finland launched the continuation war against the Soviet Union to reclaim their lost territory. Once again, the Karelian wilderness became a frozen stage for tactical movements and desperate, bloody combat. The mountain watched as empires clashed, yet the legend of the 100 dead men refused to fade. By 1940-4, massive Soviet advances pushed the Finnish borders back to their 1940 limits once again. As the Russian occupiers returned to the peak, they officially coined the terrifying name, Death Mountain. They spoke of the Sami people and ancient spirits to mask the tactical failures they could not explain. Vottovaara remained a place of dread, where the wind sounds like the whispers of those lost soldiers. No matter the official reports, the local legends of Stalo and skinwalkers continued to haunt the peak. The mountain kept its silence, even as history books tried to bury the truth under layers of propaganda. Wolves and bears were common enough, but they were never the true masters of Death Mountain's heights. To find the truth, we must look back at the ancient folklore the Soviet commanders completely ignored. The Sami people have another name for the horror that unfolded on those high, frozen peaks. They call this nightmare the Stalo, an unnatural being that haunts the deepest reaches of the wilderness. For generations, the Sami have whispered warnings about this entity to anyone daring to enter its territory. The Stalo is no mere campfire story told to frighten children during the long, dark Arctic nights. To the indigenous people of the Karelian wilderness, it is a very real and terrifying physical presence. This ancient legend describes a creature that exists outside the known laws of the natural world. During the Winter War, the Red Army marched directly into the heart of this creature's sacred domain. While the Soviets brought modern weapons, they were unprepared for a prehistoric and supernatural threat. The most chilling attribute of the Stalo, its legendary ability to shift its physical form. According to these old accounts, the creature can perfectly mimic the appearance of any forest animal. It might appear as a solitary wolf or a massive bear before revealing its true, murderous nature. Even more terrifying is the claim that the Stalo can take on a human-like appearance. How do you fight an enemy that can look exactly like a trusted comrade in your unit? This shape-shifting power explains why the Finnish scouts found so little physical evidence at Vottovaara. The massacre site showed predator-like injuries, yet no tracks of any known beast were ever found. If the killer could change its shape, it would leave no consistent trail for trackers to follow. The Stalo acts like the mountain's own immune system, reacting violently to an infection of foreign invaders. It hunts with a calculated precision that suggests an intelligence far beyond that of a wild animal. The Soviets saw only tactical heights, but they had actually trespassed upon a guarded, spiritual intersection. Every soldier who died on Vottovaara may have been a victim of this ancient, shape-shifting guardian. The lack of tracks and the sheer brutality of the scene align perfectly with these samey warnings. This is a predator that transitions between worlds, leaving only broken bodies in its silent, icy wake. The truth of the massacre involves a shapeshifter that leaves no tracks, only cold, dead bodies. The Karelian wilderness remains silent today, holding its frozen secrets beneath a heavy blanket of winter snow. Is Mount Volada a place of victory, or a warning that some places on Earth simply don't belong to us? Deep within these remote forests, the peak stands as a monument to a tragedy history cannot fully explain. Though its name translates to the Mountain of Victory, the reality of what happened here feels like hollow triumph. We look back at the Winter War and see the maps, the movements, and the cold numbers of battle. Yet the massacre of the 100 men on Vottovaara leaves a gap that military strategy alone cannot bridge. Was it the tactical brilliance of Finnish scouts, or did something ancient and hungry wake among those stones? The Sami people spoke of spirits and shapeshifters long before the first Soviet boot touched this sacred ground. To them, the Stala was not a myth, but a living danger that demanded respect and a wide berth. History is like the mountain, clear from a distance, but full of shadows when you stand directly upon it. We often dismiss folklore as mere stories, yet those stories are often forged in the fires of real terror. The Soviet commanders ignored the warnings, choosing to see only high ground where others saw a divine boundary. Their silence in the face of the unexplained is perhaps the most haunting part of this entire bloody ordeal. Ask yourself honestly, would you spend a night alone on the desolate summit of this cursed Death Mountain? Even today, hikers report strange equipment failures and an overwhelming sense of being watched from the trees. The truth of that night remains buried, much like the men who never returned from the Karelian wilderness. Perhaps the Mountain of Victory only claims that title for the wilderness that successfully reclaimed its own. We are left to wonder if some mysteries are meant to stay unsolved, guarding their secrets forever. As the mist rolls back over Vottovaara, the line between historical fact and ancient folklore remains blurred. If you want to keep your own data from being the next thing lost in the dark, check Aura below. Stay curious, stay safe, and remember that some shadows are far longer than they appear on the map.